have to sell. You don't have to take action. And sometimes the best thing you can do is wait in certain situations.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bello, and today I've got my friend Conor Kearns on the show. Conor, welcome.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. Good to
It's
see you,
great
man.
to have you. Good to see you too. You're all like fancy, dressed up. You got a bike.
There we go. Yeah, trying to look the part, man.
Yeah, it's a pretty legit to see, everything you've been up to. And it's been awesome to just keep in touch and have conversations like over the last few years since we met, probably at like a Bigger Pockets meetup in Houston a few years ago at this point, right?
It's funny. Yeah, I think it was 4 years ago.
Wow,
And
time flies, man. Yeah, I think so.
Because you had just recently transitioned out of oil and gas,
right?
And you were working in wholesaling.
Yep.
And I think I had maybe done one investment property or something. I was pretty new.
You were new too, yeah.
Yeah, and we met there, and that was funny. Just always stayed connected.
It's so cool just to stay connected because the relationships and just to see how far everyone goes, it just is inspiring to see like how far you've come in your career with real estate investing and just self-development, self-investing, which we'll talk about here today as well. But before we dive in, would you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Like what's your elevator pitch when someone's like, what do you do, Conor?
Yeah. What I typically tell people is I talk for a living. Like I don't make anything. I don't, I'm not producing anything. All I do every day is just, I talk. So I work in the real estate investing space. So investment properties, I flip properties, do Airbnbs, short-term rentals, long-term rentals, and then also act as a real estate agent. That's great. So nice. So everything in the real estate sector. Yeah, I do.
Awesome. I like that how you said you just talk all day, because the audience is probably like, are you a comedian? Are you a speaker, like a public speaker? What do you do exactly? And I know that that's such a big part of like sales is just building up rapport, talking to people, figuring out what's their problem that they're trying to solve. You don't even really talk about the product or the solution. You just talk about them. What are they needing to get? And how do you help them achieve that outcome?
Exactly. I even remember being younger, one of the biggest pivots that I had early on, I got into medical sales whenever I was 21, 22, and had some success just because I was this young, arrogant, kind of cocky guy. So that got me from here to here, but I realized pretty quickly to get from here to here, I've got to be bringing more to the table. So I remember switching my mindset because I would wake up every day and think how can I make money? If I close this deal, I'll make this much and so forth. And I hit a wall and I stopped making more and switched it to just how can I wake up every day and have good conversations? And whenever I focused on just having good conversations, then I started to make more money because I could just, like you said, help solve more problems and be more focused on the other party.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it's so hard to do. I see sometimes in Facebook groups with real estate agents or investors, they're taking on clients that are verbally abusing them. And, they're dealing with problematic people that are just not on the same page. And what they're asking, what should I do? And it's easy for everyone else to just say, well, fire them, go find the right client. But whenever you don't have the money coming in that you want, or you're financially motivated, it forces you to take on clients that you shouldn't, or deal with issues that really you should have cut ties with long ago. So being able to separate those two and just focusing on having good conversations is super important. But I know sometimes it's easier said than done, that people are like, I need this commission. I don't care if this person's going to talk trash to me in front of their family and my family. I'm still going to work with them,
It's so hard to make that distinction. And sometimes it is worth it depending on the situation. But to your point, and that actually reminds me of something Dr. John DeMartini says, someone who you turned me on to. That was so funny, by the way. For everyone listening to this, Chris sent me a screenshot of a book cover about a month ago.
You're going to love this.
Yeah, you're going to love this. There's a guy in a in a 3-button suit, and it just said the ultimate wealth guide. And I was like, yep, my girlfriend saw it. She said, that looks like something that you'd read. And I'm like, yeah, Chris knows it really well.
And you binge listened to it in like a day or two.
Yeah. It's like a 16-hour audiobook. Like, here we go. Amazing book, by the way. And one of my biggest takeaways from it was when Dr. DeMartini talks about how capitalization creates stability. So whenever you have some cash on the sidelines, you don't have to make rash decisions. You can, it doesn't matter the market fluctuations, you're set because you don't have to sell, you don't have to take action. And sometimes the best thing you can do is wait in certain situations. So yeah, that was so big for me. So it's harder to do that whenever you're younger and less established and kind of have to hop on every opportunity. And that's probably actually been one of the most difficult things last 2 years. And talking to you and seeing how you've scaled and brought on virtual assistants and all that, it's interesting. There's a takeaway from Ryan Holiday, who's one of my favorite authors. He talks about this in one of his books, how baseball players in Cuba, there's an expression for them where they say you can't walk off the island. So what that means is, in order to get picked up by a major league team here in the U.S., you have to put up big numbers. So those players in Cuba, they're swinging at everything, trying to get home runs, trying to get at bats. Mm-hmm. Then they get some attention, get brought over here, and that tactic that they used in Cuba to have success and be seen no longer applies and brings them success here whenever they're playing professionally in the States, because you can't swing at everything. So it's an interesting pivot that I feel like a lot of us have to make, where the practices and concepts that brought us success very early on sometimes can be detrimental to us if we continue to do them, especially whenever it comes to a volume standpoint, right? Because we can't do everything. And like early on, it's like whenever we lack skills, we have to rely on volume. I know me personally, like I did not know very much getting into sales. And I just relied on let me talk to a lot of people, and then, a broken clock is right twice a day. So eventually I'll be able to get something rolling, and while I kind of sharpen my skill set. But then as you get older, like the conversations look different, and you leaning into just volume isn't an effective way to navigate through all this.
Exactly.
So yeah.
I always hear that quote too, what got you here won't get you there. And it's so true. Yeah. Have you heard that one before? Where
I haven't heard that.
I love that. I think it might be a book title, or maybe it's been said in a few podcasts, but I have heard it a few times, and it makes so much sense that the skills, the hustle, brute force gets you to a certain point by working hard, but at a certain point you hit a ceiling and you have to change what you're doing, because if you always do the same thing, you're going to get what you always got, right? You have to change the things that you're doing and play at a higher level. But of course, it's difficult to do sometimes because we have to change ourselves. We don't know exactly how to get to the next level because we did things that got us to where we are now. So that's where that self-development journey happens, listening to books like that, going to conferences, having these kinds of conversations to give new insights that maybe we didn't see before to help us solve a problem or get to that next stage.
I think a couple of weeks ago, there was a mutual friend of ours, Matt Ngola, who sent us both a podcast to check out. And one of my favorite takeaways was, we oftentimes whenever we're young, we do things that we kind of work until we can't work anymore. And we're very hard on ourselves. And we have success, and it's imprinted on us that in order to continue to have success, we have to keep on being hard on ourselves. And we need to really flip that and view it as, did I succeed because of that or in spite of that?
Right.
In a lot of situations, we succeeded in spite of that.
That makes so much sense. And I was going to say that, I didn't know if it was in spite of that or despite that. I don't know how that's used grammatically. Are they kind of the same or whatever? But I totally get that, because oftentimes we mistake it. I see people who put the hustle on their sleeve, and they're kind of bragging about 4-hour nights or pulling all-nighters. I have a friend who does GC work out here in Denver, and he does a bunch of construction and taking on $200,000-$300,000 renovation projects. Like, he's landing some pretty big clients on the residential side. And he said he's pulled a few all-nighters this year. And I'm just like, I would never want to sacrifice that, because to me, health and sleep and proper rest and being able to make proper decisions is so important, that like he was kind of bragging about doing that. Whereas to me, I'm like, oh man, that's a little much. I'd probably rather go to sleep and wake up and have fresh eyes to make sure I'm making the right decision, instead of trying to do something at 4 a.m. without having the right amount of sleep, you know?
I had this one manager back in the day tell me that there's times where you need to go pedal down and times you need to go pedal up. As much as you want to zoom in, zoom out, but I think about that a lot. I think like, should I be going pedal down this week? Like, is this a week to go pedal down? And then maybe a couple days next week, go pedal up a little bit. So, but yeah,
and it's hard to know when too. Like, when do I go pedal up? When do I go pedal down? And then your pedal down may be someone else's pedal up. Everyone's got a different measuring stick where you don't know how much volume. I know we both listened to, Alex Hormozy and the sales stuff. And I've heard him say that, like at the gym, for example, I think he was saying his wife, Layla, she just didn't know how much volume you could do, like 20, 30 reps or whatever amount of, exercises at the gym. She thought maybe like 8 to 10 reps was okay. And so using that example, like say you're doing 500 sales calls a day and I'm doing 10 thinking that I'm pretty good, pedal down, your pedal down and my pedal down are totally different, right? So sometimes we have to see what's possible and reset our thermostat in a way, which is another like Ed Milet thing that he talks about.
Oh yeah.
If I start hanging out with a bunch of people who are doing 200 calls a day, and I think that I can get away with like 3 Instagram DMs, I'm probably going to reset my thermostat and realize that I'm not taking enough action based on the results that I'm trying to achieve.
Speaking of resetting of the thermostat, what was that? You had a post like a week or two ago it was about wealth blocks, and I think it was like a screenshot of a text or something in that vein. What was that? Because it was really good.
Yeah, that was awesome. And it was funny because this was the same friend. He was on my podcast, Leland Redfield. He told me about Dr. John DeMartini's book, and then I shared it with you, and I knew that you would kind of love that. But you replied just with the mind blown emoji to that, because he was texting me and he said, you have a belief that you have limiting beliefs. Because I would always just tell people, I guess we own our limiting beliefs in a way, and I'll say, yeah, I just have a limiting belief around that. Because he was asking me questions like, why haven't you made more money online? And, why are you feeling stuck? And I'm like, well, I feel like I've tried to sell so many things online. People don't take me up on them. I've made so many pitches and offers that like never made a single sale. I've never achieved it before. So part of me, every time I try it and it doesn't work at all, it makes me less likely to want to try it, because I'm like, it hasn't worked before. Why would it work now? So it's starting to force me to not believe that it's possible for myself. However, getting around people such as Leland, 7-figure a year business with a 3-person like team, him, his wife, and the operations manager, it's helping rub off his, I guess, unlimited beliefs onto my limiting beliefs. So was that the quote that I had messaged
that
you?
Was,
you said like, man, that you sent me the mind blown emoji, because mine was like blown as well, where I'm like, whoa, I have a belief that I have limiting beliefs. So really I can choose to change that belief and remove my limiting beliefs.
Yeah, it's such a great point, and it really is like the proximity of the people around us, like who we're surrounding ourselves. So because I remember thinking like being younger and thinking like, wow, like 100,000 a year is a lot, and then you meet people making 50 to 100,000 a month, and you meet people making 300,000 a month, and the paradigm shifts so much, and you realize that the people that are doing this, I mean, they breathe the same air as us, they breathe the same blood. I mean, they do things a little differently, but they're human. And I just always think like, why not me?
Exactly. And I remember you texting me that too. The secret is just getting around people who are consistently doing that, because they think different, they take bigger action. You start to model the people that you hang out with, or even the podcasts. I'll find if I'm binging a podcast, my next podcast episode will have like the same words that I just heard on the 10 podcasts I listened to from a certain person. And so as we start to hang out with higher and higher level people, you just start to think and act like them, right? You're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. It's so true, because just subconsciously, you don't even realize you talk differently, you walk differently, you keep your shoulders up, you kind of model what you're seeing in successful people that you'd like to be like. And alternatively, you can easily spot out the things that you don't like that others do, and you're like, I'm not going to do that.
if I could give younger me or younger people listening to this any like one piece of advice to take away from this, like that will give you the best ROI, it's remove toxic people from your life and surround yourself with uplifting, positive people that are either doing big things or wanting to do big things and taking daily action to achieve those goals. I mean, that is
100%.
huge. And I mean, I, like a lot of people, I struggled with that because, you know, you have certain sentiment, for various reasons. And, you know, it's hard to do sometimes. It's hard to cut ties. It's hard to move forward.
Right.
But yeah, it's the best thing that a person can do.
Absolutely. I've talked about that a lot on the podcast as well, but how did you go about removing toxic people from your life, or how do you even know they're toxic? For those who are like, yeah, I always hear you got to cut ties with toxic people, but like maybe A, what do you define as toxic person? And B, how did you remove them from your life?
So yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, there's some people that you can just, you know, stop responding to. Some other situations are a little more complex than that. Basically, I've thought a lot about this, and I really think there's two components that keep people together. And actually, you can like use you and I as a case study for this, right?
Yeah.
Because we live in Houston together, met there. Now, you know, you're in Denver, I'm in Houston. Like we still stay connected. Like, why is that? You know? And to me, it's two characteristics. So if a person has the same attitude and trajectory, so those are the two components needed for sustainability in any
Yep.
type of relationship.
Awesome.
And so those identifying factors, that's really what I look for. And it's pretty like overtly obvious whenever you start diving into it. Like, do you feel good around someone? Are they uplifting? Are they wanting big things? And I think we all know who's good and who's not. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good indicator. How do you feel after you hang out with those people? I just made this post as well the other day. Like some people energize you. When
Yeah.
some people introverts saw my calendar yesterday, I had like 6 calls with people and I had a networking event that I hosted. And you know,
Oh,
some of them were
nice.
15-minute calls. It wasn't anything crazy, but one person's like, "Man, that's a lot of calls." And I said it depends on who or the type of people you're connecting with. Most of those people are in a paid business group that I'm in. So they're like-minded. They like the same podcast, you know, Andy Frisella, Ed Milet, those kinds of things,
Yeah.
uplifting, get the work done type thing. Who energizes you and who drains you is a very good
Mm.
indicator. If we would talk and then we just feel like, man, just Connor's so negative and he just hates the world and he said the world's out to
Mhm.
get him, we wouldn't be hanging out. But the
Exactly.
fact that
Yeah.
every time we would go, you know, on get lunch at like a Mexican restaurant and just have a really cool
Yeah.
conversation and just be smiling and laughing the whole time and just
Yeah.
positive about everything while also making, you know, big moves in our relative, you know, careers and spaces, that's exactly why we're still here, you know, staying connected and talking today.
Yeah. And the trajectory, it's a funny thing because there's a sort of like, don't want to say like unwritten accountability, but if I was just, you know, sitting around not progressing, then I'd be like, Chris probably won't want to talk to me. You
Right.
know, like,
Or I would probably
you know,
push you. And I mean, it's
right.
interesting
Yeah.
too, because you never really know how you can kind of see and you can assume someone's doing well or successful, but I know also
Mhm.
not to judge because you might be sitting next to someone who kind of is dressed a little bit like, you know, t-shirt and shorts, and you don't realize that they're like a 7 or 8 figure business owner. And alternatively, someone may be super sharp and they're like someone in a real estate agent who's not doing so great this year and
Right.
literally has only closed a deal or two, right? Like you really
Mhm.
never know. And I'm teaching myself that more because I think we all tend to judge a book by its cover in like
Yeah.
10 seconds. You know, your mind is so busy that you're just like, okay, I'm just going to assume this is that kind of person. I'm going to assume that person does this. And you don't really get to know the depth of that personality until you start to talk to that person, right? So I've been more open,
Yeah.
like, hey, let's do an initial call because I know nothing about someone who's 40 years old on the other side of the Zoom call or on the other side of the coffee table. I have no
Mhm.
idea what their education is, what's their experience, who do they know, what are their connections,
Sure.
right? It's easy to take all that for
Exactly.
granted. Like, yeah, you're just some person who, I don't know, just moved here or whatever, too. You don't know anything about what I'm trying to do. But alternatively, if you just sit there and talk to them, you'd be surprised at what you might be able to learn. And especially with real estate, I'm sure you know this as well. relationships and referrals. You can get referrals from the randomest, weirdest places. Talk to someone, and then literally their cousin needs to sell a house. And I don't know if you know Stanley Azidi. He's over at he's been at Bigger Pockets several times. He's been a client of mine before as well. And I think he said most recently someone saw that he buys houses and is renovating them and things like that. And he was able to buy a friend's grandma's house who had like passed away for like a really good deal. Off market, never hit the market or anything. And he just closed on it a couple of weeks ago. That's an example of just some totally random thing where an opportunity came out of it just because he was putting content out there and just connected and stayed in touch with someone. You would never expect it, right?
Exactly. It's like the butterfly effect of it all. Like,
yes.
You never know where conversation is going to lead.
Exactly. And it sounds like you've had some really cool conversations too. Just over the last couple of years, you've aligned yourself with some mentors. And I remember you kind of told me just the thinking big, and the like one of your bosses or like a CEO of a company you worked with would take a 40-minute shower with like affirmations or something.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. Just really plugging in your mind. So you were kind of picking up these success habits from people who were doing very well for themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. People that were doing extraordinary things and just reverse engineering and seeing what they're doing differently. So I know I've been very fortunate with the people that I've been around, like working under, working with. Yeah. And just the introduction of so many different things, whether it's like frequency, like different meditation techniques, different books. I know I've been so lucky with all of that. And in fact, it kind of reminds me of something that I saw you post about. Maybe it was an email where you're talking about self-investment.
Yes.
And you said, hey, I spend X amount every month on myself. And seeing that actually like motivated me to be like, I need to
step it up.
Investing more in myself. And because what do you do? You do
I've got like a life coach. Yeah,
okay.
Life coach, sensory deprivation tanks, business coach. I joined like a business mastermind. So this year is where I finally was like, okay, I figured out a good amount on my own and by asking people questions at coffee meetings and stuff, but I need to be in the same room or even virtual room with other people. And yeah, just it's been super helpful. I have like a cadence of accountability with these different groups. One group meets every 3 times a month, another meets twice a month. And then a biweekly, another twice a month call with my life coach, like / therapist. So I have these conversations and I learn a little bit here, I learn a little bit there, and it all stacks on each other, right? Everything compounds over time to just make me so much better 6 months down the road. I'm like, okay, I'm self-aware. I know how my business is going. I know what I need to do. I just need to do it. And they kind of keep me sharp, right? Iron sharpens iron type of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how about for you? I know you invest a lot in yourself. What are some of the things that you've focused on in the last year or so that maybe you didn't used to do before?
Yeah. So therapist, performance coach. A lot of what I've been doing recently is trying to shed the metaphoric skin of past life and current life in order to usher in new chapters. And that looks like a lot of things. One, it's like new information in my mind, new sensations. I've started to do cold plunges most days, just to spur new things in my mind. I'm all about just forward progress. I tell myself that every day, like, am I learning something new? Am I doing something new? Like, am I having small victories, big victories, anything? I just want to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think moving forward is super important. And I think you said you focus more on better conversations instead of just making money. And then also just focusing on the forward progress. That's been something that is also tough to do sometimes in sales because it's so numbers driven and metrics driven. Like how many contacts have you had? How many appointments did you have? How many clients did you close or deals did you close? And if you're not seeing those numbers, even if you're putting in the inputs, it can be frustrating. And there's ebbs and flows of the market. But if you focus on the forward progress part, I'm sure it really does help you just still be content with your level of activity, even if the results aren't always reflecting the activities you're doing.
Exactly. And something I try to do, and I'm like the annoying guy who does this in situations, I try to take pictures and videos of everything and yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I want to document things because I want to be able to look back at them and see how far we've come, or whatever it is. Because if we rewind a year, it's wild, like how different 1 year's time can make.
Yeah.
And so to have those sort of like timestamps of those memories, it's, yeah, I'm all about that. And that's another way to kind of track the progress. Like one, like, what was I doing then? But like, how was I feeling then?
Yes.
So yeah. So I'll do if anyone ever looks through my camera, they're gonna see some strange stuff. But yeah, I like to just document everything. If I'm feeling good, I'll document it. If I'm feeling bad, videos of that too. So yeah, I try to, and it's something that I do for myself.
Very helpful. I've done a few,
Yeah.
I haven't been super consistent, but I have maybe 6 or 7 months of voice memos. And, once or
Mm,
twice a month, I'll just say, it's July 12th, 8 a.m. I wanted to do a quick check-in, and it'll be a 4-minute voice memo on my phone of, here's where I am. Here's a cool lead that came out of nowhere. We're under contract on this other deal. This is what I'm not so happy about. Here's where I think there's some opportunity. And then I go back 2 or 3 weeks later and I do another check-in before I listen. I don't want to listen and like taint what I'm about to say. So I do my new update, and then it's interesting to listen back to the previous one and be like, oh, that deal I was talking about, we closed it. That other random lead that I got, it turned into a real client. And it's just cool to
exactly.
track the progress. Whereas when you're stuck in the day to day, it's harder to know, because you're kind of just, you get caught in the shuffle sometimes and you don't realize what's going on.
Exactly. Actually, that reminds me. A couple of years ago, I was doing this experiment. I read about there's a paper in psychology where it said, record a message to yourself at the end of every day to listen to the next day.
That's
And
cool.
so, like if you were doing it, you'd say, "Hi, Chris. This is Chris. You did a great job with the podcast interview with Connor. You did a great job talking to this client, and awesome job on all these things." And you go through it, and then you listen. Then the next day, you listen to a voice memo from yourself from the day before. And I was traveling a lot for sales at the time. I had just a iPhone that was laying around, and I would use that for the voice memos, just so
Yeah.
it'd be on a separate phone. And so the only app that was on my phone was the voice memos, and that phone got stolen
Oh no.
out of a rental car. So there's someone in McAllen, Texas, right now walking around with an iPhone of
They're
about
probably
a
like, this guy
hundred
was
voice
weird.
memos to myself. Yeah.
You're
Hi,
like,
Connor. This is
hey
Connor.
Connor,
You did
this is
awesome
Connor.
today.
That's
Yeah.
hilarious. I mean,
Mhm.
it's really cool though. I love that idea of giving yourself that reminder the next day. And it's so powerful just to track memories and progress. And I'm big on photos and documenting the journey. And that's been the most helpful thing with this podcast is I have 360 plus videos and episodes and conversations that I can
Yeah.
always reflect on and be like, oh, I was stuck on that at the time. It seems so obvious now. Or I'm still stuck on that 2 years later. Like, what? I got to find the right person to get me through this to the next level. But it
Yeah.
just depends. You got to choose your battles, right? We're all trying to level up in so many different areas to try to sleep perfectly and eat properly and work out and make it in sales and build your empire. It can be a lot
Yeah.
to manage. How do you juggle it all?
It's a good question. I wake up early,
How early are
and
we talking?
so as of late, like 4:30.
Okay.
Yeah. So wake up, work out every morning, and I find that if I focus on the things that I can control, like working out in the morning, I feel centered. So even
Yes.
if I am traveling, I do that, and that's sort of like that's my well that I keep on going back to feel centered. So work out in the morning and also in the evening, and then just having those kind of bookends on my day helps me structure things because I'm starting with something hard and ending with something hard, and that there actually tends to make things a lot easier. As far as actual scheduling goes, I mean, things look so every day is a little different. I mean, it's hard to say exactly, but it's I don't know. How do you normally structure your time?
Yeah, I'm always just curious to see other people's schedules. And, you always hear the morning routines of successful people waking up before
Mhm.
the sun rises or before anyone else in the house is up, having that hour of quiet time to yourself, meditating, journaling, scribing. I kind of do that too, where I don't have a voice memo or something to myself to
Mhm.
remind myself of how great I did yesterday, but I do review my journal from yesterday. So I see what I typed yesterday morning. So it's kind of a similar idea of, this is what I have planned today. This is what's on my calendar. I'm meeting up with this group of people like I did last night. And today was like, it went great. We had 11 people show up. They stayed the whole 2 hours. Someone offered to pay for all the food and drinks. Like he just took the bill and paid for it. And everyone's like, this is so cool. Just you're with like-minded, generous people. And then I go about and do, everything else throughout the day. Sometimes it's interesting on my side. I just have Calendly links for everything. I'm so big on that determines my schedule. Like the 5 or 6 calls I had yesterday were from people I messaged last week that are in business groups. And I sent them the link and like 5 of them booked for Monday. So I'm like, well, I know what I'm doing Monday. So I don't know if I have rules in place, but depending on the activities that I do, like how many messages did I send, how many of my Calendly links did I send out, and when did those people book, that kind of determines my schedule sometimes, within reason. And I can move things around if necessary. But sometimes I feel like I do what their schedule allows. If it matches with mine, I'm open and I'll show up. How about for yourself? Is there any rhyme or reason? Well, I know now it's probably more structured with what you're focusing on with real estate, but I know there has to be some flexibility depending on appointments and calls and things like that.
Exactly. Every day looks a little different. I mean, like today it's a bunch of meetings, getting a new unit photographed that I'm putting on Airbnb. So there's just it's always a bunch of stuff. I actually did get an assistant recently, so that's been helpful.
Like a locally based assistant or overseas?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I might need to pick your brain sometime about getting the VA from the Philippines. Is that where you're?
Yeah, from the Philippines. Yeah. I mean, it's helpful, I would imagine, to have an in-person assistant to run tasks and things like that for you to run errands. So I would love that. I just don't have enough for them. I tried to find someone in Denver, and like it only lasted a month because I didn't really have anything for her to do other than schedule haircuts and massages. And she probably got bored of that pretty fast.
Yeah. But yeah, you're like a big motivator behind a lot of the automation that I've implemented. I remember That's awesome. You were one of the first people that showed me like Calendly, and so I have a lot of with all my STRs, of course, like everything's automated, so I can be
short-term rentals for everyone who's like, what's an STR?
Yes, short-term rentals, Airbnbs, so those are all automated, and so pretty hands off. It allows me to just kind of focus more of my daily bandwidth on things that I actually need to be handling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's great. You can focus on the big picture stuff and delegate out the rest.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're covering a lot of good stuff. I know there were a couple of social media questions that we were trying to figure out. What do people want to learn about, you when you're on the show? And so we can talk about them. So what made you want to get into real estate? For those listening, you've got few rental properties, long-term, short-term, you do some flips. You've been in it for a few years. Like we said, we met back in 2018, probably at this point. So what made you want to get into real estate?
Yeah. So I've talked about this before on a couple of podcasts. It was, so I got into medical sales really young. I was 21, 22, and just knew I wanted to try to make a lot of money. And I had a certain dollar amount in my mind that I wanted to make in a year. I hit that and I didn't feel happy because that number was sort of arbitrary because there was no purpose behind it. Mm-hmm. And around the same time, the book Rich Dad Poor Dad came into my life. I read that, and that book changed everything for me. I think I bought my first property 3 or 4 months after that, and then just it's been pedal down ever since. Basically, the reason I wanted to get into real estate was to have something of my own. When you're working for a company, you're building someone else's dream. So I wanted to have my own things that I own, my own things that I was building, and it was cool because it at the time I was an employee, and I was it made me a better employee because I had purpose. So whenever I would get these commission checks, I was like, cool, like this can go toward the down payment on a house. And it actually made me work harder because I wanted to grow that portfolio.
Wow.
So so that was the reasoning behind getting into real estate. It was all purpose. And the more I got into it, I got to meet cool people like Chris and a lot of other guys and girls that we know. And I was like, wow, I really like talking to these types of people. They're doing cool things. So it put me in just great situations that help me, achieve more. So I just kind of gets addicting. So yeah, just perpetuated, and that was the catalyst behind it.
Awesome.
Purpose.
Awesome. Yeah, that's exciting because it's really cool how you said it actually helped you do a better job so that you could close more deals, get more commissions, and buy more real estate. When you have that purpose, there's some meaning behind it instead of just, man, I hit this goal and it's an empty feeling. Now you know what exactly you can do, and you're providing housing for other people who choose to, live at your places that you offer and that you've renovated. I remember one of the stories that you were telling, I think one of the Bigger Pockets meetups, where you were showing the some update you did. You went to Home Depot and you had like a whole cart full of supplies and materials. And I think this is one of your first rentals. And I just remember that story, and the family was super grateful that you were doing all these things for them. And I can't remember the details behind it. I'm sure for you, as a few years ago, and you've helped so many people with different things that you're maybe like, what exactly you're talking about.
I think I remember what you're talking about.
It might have been like a blue house with like the little white, what's that stuff called? Like the trellis or whatever.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I remember that one. Yeah, I think it was like it was within the first couple of years of buying properties, and it was an area that I wasn't familiar with. And yeah, I was having to do a lot of renovations there that I hadn't done before on properties. And yeah, I remember going to Home Depot or Lowe's before the closing and buying all the stuff, and just thinking like,
you didn't really know
I don't
what
know.
you were doing.
Yeah, I don't know how this is gonna work. I don't know who's gonna install this stuff, and I don't know if this house is gonna rent because I've never bought over here. But we're gonna see what happens. And yeah, it was cool with that one. And I'm kind of joking. I did a good amount of market research, felt good about the area, but there's the newness element where fear of the unknown. And I remember with that rental in particular, like my crew finished the rehab on it, and I remember putting the for rent sign in the yard and thinking like, okay, let's see how this goes. Putting the sign in the yard, walking back into the house to grab my keys and head out. And as I'm walking back into the house, my phone rings, and it's someone calling me wanting to rent the house. There's someone who's driving by right as I was putting the sign.
Did they end
up
up renting it? That person? Or
I think I was like fielding applications, and I think it was the first 5 or 6 that I got. It rented so quickly. Yeah,
awesome.
That whole project was, I think, like under 30 days. Got it rehabbed and rented. Yeah.
That's awesome. In and out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just remember that story. It just came to mind, so I wanted to mention it real quick. Well, another question, and I know we're kind of running short on time, and I want to be respectful of your time, but there were a couple last questions here that came through on social media. What keeps you going through real estate droughts? I'm sure you probably saw it earlier this year with the competition in the market and multiple offers, harder to get a good deal, harder with the multiple offer situations. I mean, have you really felt much of like a real estate drought in a way? And if so, what really keeps you going through that?
There's an expression that I think about a lot. It's opportunity is like the ocean, and we all have a 5-gallon bucket. So it's funny with a lot of my friends that invest in real estate as well. It's like, yeah, we have the same title, but our parameters are totally different.
Right.
And yeah, so because of that, there's more than enough to go around, and there are opportunities, but all of our parameters are different with what we're looking for. Is it competitive? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't know. I find ways to get small daily victories in other ways to maintain a healthy mental state, because yeah, absolutely, it can drive you crazy. I remember last year submitting offers on multifamily properties basically every single day for 6 months. Jeez. And not getting anything. Then after 6 months, finally got something. But like, yeah, it's tough. So you really do have to love the process of it. Yeah. And which I do. I know you do. So it's not, it's bearable in those times. But let's be real, it is hard. And that's for me, like, where like I read a lot of books. I just try to keep learning new things, have different approaches, talk to different people, have the ability to pivot. I mean, like for me, like short-term rentals are a relatively new thing. I've been in it less than a year now. But so just talking to people and finding ways that, hey, maybe this would work as well, because what I'm doing right now isn't working. Yeah. Yeah.
That's helpful. And that goes back to just surrounding yourself with big thinkers, like-minded people. You can mastermind as you get stuck. Instead of just suffering in silence, you can ask
Hmm.
three people who are in a similar business or further along. Hey, what did you do when you ran into this? Oh, simple. I did this, this, and that. Right. If
Yeah.
you're just sit there trying to brainstorm and you're just feeling frustrated, you may not ever come up with those solutions, and other people have already solved those problems. It makes more sense to just have those conversations and leave with your little notebook full of ideas of things you can do today to resolve those.
Exactly.
Very helpful. And then another last question that we had is, how do you plan your exit from corporate? I'm sure there's people who follow me, people who follow you, they're in a day job, they're not super happy with what they're doing. How exactly would you recommend people do that?
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's going to look different for everybody. Some people want to have more money put aside. For me, I could have left the corporate world like a year and a half ago, but I held out a little bit. It's not. I don't know. It's funny. You listen to Bigger Pockets, and a lot of people like view the day job, the W-2 as the enemy. And I think there's a ton of value in working for a big company. There's a ton of value to be able to be W-2. So it's not a bad thing. So if you're listening to this and you do work for a company, you can still invest in real estate. I was working W-2 for 6-7 years, and was able to buy a lot of properties during that time while having a full-time job. So you don't have to do one or the other. There are ways that you can create autonomy within your day job to be able to invest on the side, and then eventually when you're comfortable, pivot out. But it looks different for everybody.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. And I mean, hindsight's always 2020. I think I quit my job too prematurely in 2017. And I've got friends who have 20 plus rentals that they've bought over the years, and they just worked at, the similar type of job to what I had. They just stuck there for 5 to 7 years and bought all these properties. And then they left when they had their empire kind of like, hey, I could pretty much retire today and manage these from the income I'm getting. But again, everyone's journey is a little bit different. And it depends on how much, like you said, how much do you want to have set aside? Do you want to have some kind of cash flowing asset that you can rely on somewhat, or, somewhat reliably? So yeah, it's going to be dependent on those situations. And obviously it helps if we don't have to put food on the table for like 3 kids, and, for the sole income provider, that's probably going to be a little more difficult to walk away from than if you're just a young single person. I know we were talking about this, like, hey, what do you do for insurance? I'm like, buddy, I just talked to someone on my podcast about this.
Yeah,
go check out this resource.
Yeah.
Like, that's another entrepreneurial thing of like, man, I'm not going to have these great benefits that I have at this day job if I leave. And how does that work? Once you're, over 26 or whatever, you can't mooch off your parents' insurance anymore. So it's been an interesting journey. It's part of the journey too. You're learning all these things like, oh, insurance, like what do I do when I leave the job, right? There's all kinds of questions that pop up, and it's just another task on our to-do list of infinite to-dos.
Well said.
The list just keeps getting bigger, and the items just keep getting more challenging. I think as you level up, the problems get bigger, but so do the rewards.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so that's really how you have to do it. And I've taken some notes down too. I love what you said earlier just about the baseball example. Like you can't walk off the island. And then hanging out with the right people, attitude and trajectory. How do you feel after hanging out with those right people? Is there anything else that you'd like to talk through or share, or anything on your journey that you're kind of pondering at the moment?
Yeah. I'm trying to think about the audience, like what would be the best takeaway, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it's a lot of people that are maybe earlier on in their entrepreneurial journeys. And is that
Yeah, we probably just
or?
assume just Pareto principle, like maybe 20% of the people in the audience are like at that level where they're kind of killing it, doing well. And a lot of people in the audience are more like, okay, I just stumbled on this podcast. Like, I want to get out of my day job. How do I do it? Or have a side hustle. And I built a website. There are quite a few people that are the newer stages. I think podcast is a great way for people to start, right? It attracts the people who are looking to do stuff. So I know there are people in the audience that have reached out. They want to quit the day job. They don't know how. They want to pick something to build up as a side hustle, and they're not sure what. So certainty, maybe. I think that was always a great takeaway, is just how did you plan your path that you're on? And did you make a plan? Did you kind of stumble upon it? Did you find resources intentionally, or did you just like, did they come to you because they were on your radar? Does that make sense? Like how did you get to where you were? Were you intentional about it? Did you set a plan, and did the plan actually align with what you had in mind? I think that would be very helpful. If that was even a question, I forgot what my question was, but you kind of know what I'm saying, right?
So like takeaways for the listeners. I feel like a lot of times whenever I'm talking to like someone in their early 20s and they're like, yeah, I want to get into real estate, or it's always very vague what they want. And so my advice is just to iron out the parameters of what you're looking for, right? Like someone says, oh, I want to invest in real estate. Where do you want to invest? Anywhere.
I don't know. Yeah.
how can I help you?
I also kind of ignore clients who tell me like, I just want a deal anywhere, any zip code. I'm like, I'm not going to find that, because you're not going to know how to spot a deal.
Yeah. I mean, firsthand, I don't want to deal anywhere. I want to deal in very specific places with very specific parameters. And I could tell, so it's iron out your parameters of what you're looking for. And then also like, there's a big misconception. So like, everyone listening or watching this, like if you're looking at like Chris Bello and I right now, like this is what we look like after we like wash off all the blood, sweat, and tears of the day. Okay. So like,
although today we're starting off on a good note. I was excited. I'm like, this is going to set a great tone for my day.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what we look at, but during the day, like we're out there, like it's a lot of work. Yeah. It's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of mental fatigue. And I think we both love it, but it's a lot of work. And I know like early on, starting off, it's a ton of grunt work, and it's not sexy, and a lot of people don't care. Like we're joking about that house and stuff. Like I remember, I was in medical at the time, and I remember waking up at 4:30, driving over to that property and working on some stuff over there before the contractors got there for the day, having my scrubs with me, showering at the property, throwing on the scrubs, running meetings all day, and then driving there, getting there at 6, and then like helping the contractors finish up stuff at 10 or 11. Wow. And then like I operated like that for years. And like that's all the stuff that people don't see or didn't see, but like that type of stuff is occurring. Like there's a lot of people working really hard and putting in the hours, and I feel like early on, like you have to do that. Like don't be afraid to work, because a lot of times you just got to just put your nose down and just get the hours in.
Very good point. And I mean, even from your story, some people document it on social media in more detail than others, but I'll see, you'll occasionally post a few things like from Ryan Holiday or like the stoicism emails that you get, but like we'll see 2 or 3 things and it's just like mindset and motivation. We don't know when you're painting the property, like all those little things in between. You only like, that's all people see, or maybe those 3 photos or the reel you post at the next closing. They don't see all the work that went behind it. And it really would be impossible unless you had a 24/7 news crew like following you around and making some reality TV show, right? So that's a great reminder to everyone. I've been pulling away from it a little more because I'm like, I try to document what I do to some extent, but sometimes it makes more sense to just turn off the phone and focus on it, right? Remove the distractions. Because if you go on to Instagram or anything to document it, oh, I got a notification, I got a message. And then 20 minutes later, I'm like, what was I going to do? Oh yeah, I was going to document what I'm doing right now. I should have just done it from the beginning without having to worry about sharing every little detail with the world. So that's really good advice, Conor. Is there anything else you'd like to leave with the audience, or where they can find you, anything like that at all?
Yeah, sure. Check me out on Instagram. It's at Conor, Conor, Patrick Kearns. Kearns is Kearns. So if you go to Chris's Instagram, him and I follow each other, so you can find me pretty easily there. And all my contact is there. So questions or anything like that, just reach out. I love networking. I love talking to new people. So that's the best place to reach me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Conor. This has been a really fun conversation. Thank you everyone for listening to the show. Again, reach out to Conor, follow him on Instagram if you have any questions or anything, and just follow his journey. Good dude. I just always see you smiling, even if you're ever struggling internally. Like I can never tell because you're just so positive and upbeat. And that's why I can't wait. You're going to be coming over to the wedding and stuff. My fiance and I getting married in October. Like you're a great person to just have around. And I made that post that I meant it. There's a lot of good people like yourself that I need to hang out with more. And I just we haven't made the time to do so. So this was a great opportunity to catch up and share your story with my audience as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Thanks, Connor.